Hello and Happy New Year, New York Giants fans. Welcome to your Valentine's Views podcast for Monday, the first one of 2024. And we're here to discuss the Giants' 26-25 loss on Sunday to the Los Angeles Rams, a game that the Giants probably could have won, but really kind of shot themselves in the foot. And here to help me discuss the game and the season, as always, is Tony DelGenio of Big Blue View. Happy New Year, Tony. How are you?
I'm good at Happy New Year to you and everyone listening.
Stay up and watch the ball drop last night,
Yeah, I stayed up.
which kind of, I guess, symbolic of what the Giants did yesterday. They dropped a lot of balls and dropped a game they probably should have won.
Yeah, really. I'm not sure the Giants deserved to win that game, but they sure had chances to win it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they didn't deserve to win the game, but they most certainly, coulda, shoulda, woulda won the game if a lot of things had turned out differently. I As I started writing my post game column last night, I was thinking about, you know, writing a column basically, saying how it was sort of symbolic of the way the season has gone for the Giants. A lot of things that didn't turn out the way they could have or should have. A lot of opportunities to make things happen that just didn't happen. And as I started going back through my notes and the game book, I was like, there's even more examples here than I thought. Penalties, missed tackles, 5 or 6 dropped passes, misses by Tyrod Taylor. It was just, missed extra point by Mason Crosby, play calls that backfired. I thought the last sequence of play calls after Tyrod Taylor's scramble was a little bit mismanaged, but just so many opportunities for things to turn out differently. And yet it wound up being a kind of a microcosm of how a team winds up being 5-11.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description of yesterday and the season, right? The Giants had chances to win a number of games. I mean, I think, we saw early on that they weren't going to be as good as last year's team, but still they had chances to win probably 2 or 3 other games that they wound up losing this year, and certainly yesterday was one of them, and it's just the kind of season this has been.
Absolutely. And of course, I guess to put a ribbon on it, Tyree Phillips gets hurt. Sort of another offensive lineman, down for the count. Sounds like a bad injury for Phillips. Sounds like a torn quad. He
Mhm.
was on crutches in the locker room after the game with basically a hip to ankle brace on that leg. So that's not a good injury for Phillips, and that's going to be a long recovery for him.
Yeah, and you wonder whether he'd even be ready by next season or not, because the Giants have nothing but questions at right tackle at the moment.
Yeah, they have nothing but questions across that offensive line. But Tony, it was just, I looked at it last night. Penalties in the fourth quarter that negated plays. How does Jalen Hyatt run a pass route on a 4th and 1 where he catches, he's running a drag route, which is a 2 or 3 yard route, but how does he run a drag route across the line and wind up catching the ball behind the line of scrimmage? I'll never know. Just so many examples that lead to, a season gone wrong for the Giants. So really, just the kind of year it's been.
Yeah, and it was a pretty frustrating game to watch. It was an exciting game to watch,
Absolutely, it was
and
fun to watch.
yeah, and I mean, I thought early on in the game, it looked like it was in danger of one that was going to get away from them, because the Rams just kind of methodically marched down the field and scored. Not the first time they had the ball. They lost the ball on downs after the second consecutive challenge by Brian Dable, but it looked like the Rams offense was able to just kind of methodically move the Giants downfield, and they could kind of do whatever they want, even though it took time. And I said, this could be a long afternoon. But really, the Giants were very competitive in this game and had plenty of chances to win.
Well, one of the reasons they were competitive is they got turnovers from the Rams, which that's how they won during their 3-game winning streak. And it, Dane Belton, we'll start there. Dane Belton, his best game in the NFL. And, you never anoint a guy after one game, because there's been a lot of other evidence, of Belton, really not taking advantage of an opportunity, 4th-round pick, a year ago. But last night was very encouraging for Belton. What did he have? 2 interceptions after Matthew Stafford had not thrown an interception for 4 games. 2 interceptions, couple passes defense, a fumble recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Really impressive performance. And maybe, just maybe, Dane Belton is showing us that he can still become the player that the Giants thought he would be when they drafted him a year ago.
Yeah, and that's a potentially exciting thing. I mean, you don't want to emphasize turnovers too much, but you don't want to emphasize them too little either. And the Giants have been a team now for a season and a half that does not get turnovers, and fumble recoveries occasionally, but rarely interceptions in this last half of the season. If there's one thing that has happened that's a positive note, is that they've really become a turnover generating machine on defense. And so that's a good thing going forward if they can maintain it. But I think the question for Dane Belton is, can he make enough plays when he's not intercepting the ball to warrant staying on the field? Can he be somebody that actually prevents passes from being completed? And he did that yesterday a couple of times. And so that would be a nice thing to hope for if they have both him and Jason Pinnock. Then they're in good shape at that position going forward. But I guess we have to see over time whether Belton could do it. I guess he'll get another chance, I think, because Pinnock was hurt yesterday, I believe, right? And
right.
So we may see him again against the Eagles next week.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit later on about offseason and players that might move on from the Giants, but we don't know what's going to happen with Xavier McKinney. So you could be in a situation next year where Jason Pinnock and Dane Belton are your starting safeties for the Giants. So yesterday was definitely encouraging if you think that Belton will have to play a bigger role going forward. Tony, I wanted to talk about the game that Tyrod Taylor played last night. And obviously I do kudos and wet willies, and we have the middle ground of what we affectionately call the Quilly, sort of half kudos, half wet willy, a guy who basically helped both teams, during the game. And before I had even written the kudos and wet willies last night, a discussion broke out in our chat room about guys who deserved, what categories they should fall in. And I think it was Chris Flum who basically put the idea out there that Tyrod's game was really the perfect Quilly, perfect definition of a Quilly. 319 yards, the most beautiful 80-yard touchdown pass that you'll ever see. And it was funny because in the middle of a conversation, I asked Taylor last night if it was the best ball he had ever thrown. And he said no, but he said it might have been the farthest. And in fact, he was like, I would love to know exactly how far the ball traveled in the air. And
so
if you count, go ahead.
I heard 61 yards.
I counted yard markers, and I came up with 62. So it's 60 plus, because it looks like he's throwing it at the 13 and Slayton catches it at the opposite 25.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on, so it's 61 or 62 yards. And amazingly, Slayton catches that ball in stride. And Tyrod ran for 40 yards. He made some other big throws. And yet, along the way, Tyrod Taylor showed everyone why he's in his 13th year in the league and he's never been able to hold a starting job. He admittedly indecisive. He misses what really was a 3 or 4 yard shovel to Saquon Barkley for a 2-point conversion when he admitted, he's like, I could run for this. I could throw it to Saquon. I'm not sure which one to do. I'll just shovel it. And he threw it 2 yards behind Saquon into the ground. Amazing how you can miss on that throw and throw a perfect 62-yard pass to Darius Slayton in stride. Couple of other bad plays along the way by Taylor, misses. Even on that last drive, I think he threw one to an open Wan'Dale Robinson. He threw the ball straight into the ground. He showed everybody why, he's a backup that teams want, but why he's a backup to begin with.
Yeah, he's a very frustrating guy to watch. I mean, there's no question that the pass to Slayton was the most beautiful pass play I've seen the Giants complete in years. He's in Justin Herbert territory when we're talking about arm strength, really. I mean, I think if you remember back a couple of years when Justin Herbert played against the Giants in LA, and just before the half, when it looked like the Chargers would probably run out the clock, they sent Jalen Guyton down the middle, and Jalen Guyton split the safeties, and Justin Herbert passed another ball, I think that was about 60 yards in the air for a touchdown to Guyton just before the half. And people were showing that replay among season highlights for the rest of the season. And Herbert, I think, throws balls like that routinely when he gets the chance to do it. And obviously, you take the pass yesterday and the one the week before to Slayton that was not as far, but was still another beautiful hit him in stride pass. And it's obvious that Tyrod Taylor has the arm strength that neither of the other quarterbacks on the Giants do, and he's probably got as much arm strength as any quarterback in the NFL right now. I mean, close to it anyway. As you say, he just does not have the touch on short passes, and if you can't always be completing 60-yard bombs all the time. I mean, if you could, football would be easy, right? You just find a guy with the strongest arm and let him sling it out there, and you just eat up the field every time. But if you can't keep those methodical drives going, you don't wind up putting that many points on the field. And the Rams defense, other than their pass rush, was ripe to be taken yesterday, because their defensive backs aren't that good this season. And you could have marched up and down the field on them and put 30, 35 points up on the board. But you've got to maintain drives with those short passes to keep drives moving, to move the chains and get another set of downs. That's what he does not do well.
No, as I said, he shows you why he's a backup quarterback. And as you said, it's just very frustrating. And Taylor, Tom Canavan of the Associated Press asked Tyrod last night. He said, do you sit there and wonder how you can throw a perfect pass to Darius Slayton, more than 60 yards in the air, that winds up, being an 80-yard touchdown, and then you try to throw a 2-yard pass to Saquon Barkley and you can't get it there? Do you wonder how that happens? And Taylor said, he said, that's just how the game is. He said, it's frustrating. He said, that's just how the game is. And what he said about the 2-point conversion was he admitted being indecisive. He admitted getting outside the pocket and seeing, okay, this play is here. There's no defenders in sight. All right. I can flip this to Saquon and it's 2 points. I can run this and it's 2 points. And he wasn't sure which one to do. And he said, indecision in the NFL. He said, nothing good ever happens when you're indecisive. And he was indecisive and nothing good happened. And it's just how you miss that play is mystifying. And as I've said, it's kind of a microcosm of everything that's gone wrong for the Giants this year. You missed the simplest play you could possibly make that winds up, costing you a game.
Yeah, and maybe that's the difference between short passes and long passes, is that when you got a play like the one he made to Slayton yesterday, there's not a whole lot of thinking to do. You take a look at, so what I think he is good at doing, and not just the physical part of throwing the ball 60 yards, which not many people can do in this world, right? But it's more than just getting that ball out there. When you throw it, you have to recognize where the receiver is relative to the defensive back, and if you're going to be successful on those plays, you have to make the decision to throw it before the receiver is actually past the defensive back. You have to recognize when the receiver is let's say even or just about even with a defensive back, and has leverage on him, and that he's going to pass by him and is going to be open. So you have to have that anticipation before you make the throw. But on short passes, where it's there's more than that one decision, perhaps that you're going to. You may have several different reads, and within a few yards of the line of scrimmage, it may not be as easy for you to figure out which guy is going to be open a second later or something like that. And maybe that's where the hesitation comes in from him, the indecision that causes him to make throws that he shouldn't. A 60-yard throw, you have no choice but to completely commit to the throw, or else you're not making it to begin with. The short throws, yeah, you don't have to be in perfect position all the time. You can just flick it out there, and maybe that's what happens to him. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see next week, I think, because I'll be shocked if he doesn't start against the Eagles. And maybe with 2 games in a row of him making these beautiful long bombs to Slayton, but missing on a number of short passes, because yesterday was not the first time. He did that numerous times against the Eagles in Philadelphia on Christmas Day, where he passed short to He passed at Barkley's ankles. He passed at Darren Waller's ankles in that Eagles game. Maybe after a couple of weeks of doing that, maybe he'll, something will kick in for him, and for that last game, he'll finally be more decisive on the short throws. Because it's a shame, because he has so much physical ability, and yeah, I mean, he was a starter for 3 years with Buffalo early in his career, and he's more than a capable backup. I mean, he's about as good a backup quarterback as you can find, I think, in the NFL. So it's really a shame that he can't get that part of his game together. But we'll see next week whether he does better or not.
Tony, I want to talk about the final drive before we move on to a couple of big picture topics for the Giants as they come to the final game of the season. There were a lot of questions for Brian Daboll and questions for players last night about the decision to run the ball on second down. All right. Now, to sort of paint the picture, you've got Mason Crosby, 39 years old, kicking in only his second game of the season. Obviously not the leg strength of a healthy Graham Gano. 54 yards is a kick you're comfortable with if it's Graham Gano. You think he's got a really good shot at making that kick. 54 yards, that it's in the MetLife Stadium wins. It's a miracle if Mason Crosby makes that kick. Tyrod Taylor makes a great decision, gets out of the pocket, runs for 31 yards, puts the Giants at the Los Angeles 34-yard line. And I think if I look at the game book, I think there were 43 seconds left at that point in time. Giants had no timeouts, so they've got some serious clock management decisions to make. In retrospect, they spiked the ball on first down. I don't think they needed to spike the ball, Tony. I think you can run up there and don't waste a play. Run a play. You run a play, you get up there, you're still going to have 30 seconds left. Spike the ball after you run a play if you need to, but run a play and get your 5 or 6 yards, because let's be real. Mason Crosby said the winds were blowing across MetLife Stadium. Even the kick that he did make, he said he aimed it at the right upright, and that ball was not only short, it finished outside the left upright. So he didn't even hit it. He didn't even hit it far enough to the right. So, but
yeah, Lawrence Tynes said that yesterday on Twitter that at that end of MetLife you have to aim a field goal toward the right post the way the winds blow.
Which is what he did. He just
yeah.
didn't hit it out. He just didn't hit it out far enough.
Yeah.
I think Tynes also said, Crosby's just not familiar enough with the winds there. But even 52 yards from the 34, that is very, very questionable. Although Crosby insisted he thought he could get it there. That's very questionable for Crosby at this point in his career to be able to get the ball there in those conditions. But so I wasn't sure about the spike. Did you think I didn't think they needed to spike the ball there. I thought just run the play.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had several issues with that sequence. First of all, I agree with you. They did not need to spike the ball. On the other hand, this is the second consecutive week that a Giants game that they had a chance to win has ended in somewhat similar fashion. Because if you remember last week against the Eagles, after they got down to whatever it was, the 28-yard line or something like that, they hit Darren Waller with a pass, and Waller was not quick to get up. But also, once he did get up, it took the Giants, I think they ran like 17 seconds off the clock before they ran another play, and there was so little time left that they only had one chance to take a shot at the end zone at the end of the game. Whereas with kind of think better clock management, they probably could have had two different shots at the end zone at the end of the game last week. Yesterday, I agree with you. They didn't need to spike the ball, but the other thing I would say is that calling a running play rather than a pass play after that is something that I question, and a draw of all running plays. I just don't get that. I think if you have a tremendous run blocking offensive line, like let's say the Cleveland Browns do, maybe, or the Philadelphia Eagles have had. I'm not so sure this year about the Eagles, but historically they've had a good run blocking offensive line. Then maybe you can run and get a few yards closer. But yeah, given the situation, I would have much rather they just tried a couple of passes in order to get closer, see if you could gain another 10 yards and make it a 40-something yard field goal instead of a 50-something yard field goal. So I thought they really botched that. And I think one of the overall things that has made me, and I think lots of Giants fans, uncomfortable about this season is that there's a lot of head scratching play calls by Dable and Kafka in important game situations this season that I don't think we saw very much of last season. And we just wonder, for a team that wanted to be kind of aggressive offensively, they don't call plays in a way that befits that. And I guess the only thing I can conclude is that they have very, very little confidence in the offense that's out there, and they're just trying to avoid terrible things happening, and in so doing, they don't make good things happening in these crucial situations.
To his credit, last night, Tony, Brian Daboll said that he would like to have the call back on the draw play to Saquon. That cost the Giants 2 yards. And although Mason Crosby said he still thought that was makeable from there, I think we saw from the kick itself, which he said he hit really well. If he hit that ball really well, he had no shot of ever making that kick, because the ball was well short and it was wide. So he had no shot of making the kick from there. I mean, to his credit, he didn't say this was impossible for me. He said, I thought I could get it there, and all of those kinds of things. But the Giants needed more yardage. at that point, and they didn't get it. They wasted a play with the spike. They wasted a play with the draw play. And what I will say when you talk about play calling is the offensive line has been a mess since week 1. And it's very difficult to be a play caller, and it's very difficult to run consistent offense. And when your offensive line is such a mess, the Giants gave up 6 more sacks yesterday, 83 now for the season. Stop and think about this number, 83 for the season. And the stat that I saw over 2 years, the 2 previous years, Daniel Jones had been sacked 87 times total. And the offensive line was thought to be awful in those 2 years. And this year, with 1 game to go, you might surpass that number. 6 sacks yesterday, and it probably could have been 9 or 10 without the escapability of Tyrod Taylor. Run blocking that leads to way too many plays where Saquon Barkley's hit behind the line of scrimmage. People wanted me to give Saquon Barkley a wet willy in my kudos and wet willies last night. And maybe I could have, because he did drop 2 balls where he did have some space to run. But I'm not holding 12 carries for 39 yards against Saquon Barkley. There's no place for him to go. When he's getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, when he's getting hammered at the line of scrimmage, there's no place for him to go most of the time. So I'm not holding his low rushing total against him at all.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. He has no place to run as a Giant on a lot of the plays, and they're lucky when he gets a couple of yards sometimes. And you watch the holes that other teams open up for their running backs, and it's just forget about it. I mean, you look at what the Rams did yesterday with Kyren Williams, and the Rams are not a perfect, but a pretty good lesson for the Giants, because they have for years had a good offensive line, but around the time they won that Super Bowl, their offensive line started to age out. Andrew Whitworth retired, and last season the Rams offensive line was just a complete mess, and that was one of the reasons that they went from winning the Super Bowl to being 5-12 last season, which increasingly it looks like that's where the Giants might wind up as well this season. But their offensive line was an absolute mess last season, and they wound up drafting Steve Avila, a guard, in the 2nd round. They made a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers to bring in another offensive lineman, I think for a 3rd round pick, if I remember it correctly. And then they had a competition between a couple of other new guys they brought in, and wound up starting an undrafted free agent on that offensive line. And all of a sudden, that offensive line, which was terrible in 2022, is pretty good in 2023, giving Stafford more time to throw. Although yesterday you wouldn't have known that, because I think Wink Martindale's blitzes and things like that actually were pretty effective after about the first quarter in getting pressure on Stafford. But the Rams more or less rebuilt their entire offensive line in one off season, and so it's possible to do. And I think that's the thing that really makes Giants fans scratch their heads, is like, how difficult can it be to get a functioning offensive line? And we're talking about basically a decade where the Giants have hardly ever had that.
Tony, that sort of leads me into another topic, maybe the final sort of big topic that we'll talk about. And that is really sort of turning the page toward the long term. This 1 game left against the Eagles, and it would be kind of nice to beat the Eagles and deny them the NFC East title, which they may not win anyway, but it would be really nice to for the Giants to take that away from the Eagles in week 18. A game, by the way, that will be 4:25 on Sunday. The NFL finally set their week 18 schedule, so that's a 4:25 game on Sunday, so you guys can can plan your viewing activity for the season finale. But really, Tony, the long-term question, the long-term thing about this game, this is going to be the last game for a lot of Giants players and a lot of Giants coaches. Talk about coaching staff. Could be the last game for Wink Martindale. Could be the last game for all three coordinators, depending on the situation. I know a couple of assistant coaches have already got opportunities elsewhere. Could be other assistant coaches who move on. Could be a lot of players who aren't with the Giants next year. And that list is topped by Saquon Barkley because we don't know what's going to happen. That list includes Xavier McKinney because he's a free agent. That includes Paris Campbell, who has been inactive now for several weeks. It might include Justin Pugh. It might include Ben Bredesen. It might include Adoree Jackson. It's a lot of players and a lot of potential turnover coming for the Giants in this coming off season. Just quickly, just your thoughts about some of the players, some of the coaches, some of the decisions that the Giants have to make this offseason.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things I notice about myself, and I think maybe any fan would identify this, is that you have no control over what your immediate reaction to the result of a close game is. Your brain and your body are going to react the way they're going to react. And so I've noticed this now for 2 weeks. First, when Tyrod could not complete or could not find a guy open really for a pass in the end zone to win the game against Philadelphia the previous week. And then yesterday when Crosby's 54-yard field goal attempt went wide left. And my initial reaction in that millisecond after you realize that that's the result is, oh, damn, they lost another one. And then what I find myself doing is like 1 second later saying, but there's a better draft position. So I think a lot of us have been kind of teetering between wanting to see the team win and do well with the players they have and acknowledging that they really need a lot of help in a lot of places. So I think the players you mentioned, as far as Ben Bredesen goes, I would say that Bredesen is good enough to be a backup tackle or backup guard or even center on the team, but he shouldn't be. He's not good enough to start. And really, if you look at their offensive line, who is good enough to start on that offensive line? Clearly, besides Andrew Thomas, John Michael Schmitz, you've got to give him obviously more time. He's a rookie center. He came in under difficult circumstances with very little help and all kinds of chaos surrounding him. The fact is, though, I mean, he hasn't had the greatest rookie season. It's not like he's come in and just dominated there at center. I've seen him make good blocks, especially on some running plays. I think he's very active. I think he looks for work on the offensive line. He doesn't just make one block and then just watch the play. He goes looking for other guys he can block. So, I kind of like what I see from him in run blocking. I haven't convinced myself yet that he can be an NFL caliber pass blocker. I see him get beat a lot on pass rushes, but he's a rookie, and I think that's a position that takes some time to really get acclimated to. But so let's say between him and Andrew Thomas, let's say you've got two guys on the offensive line. I think the other three positions on the line are completely up for grabs next season. You mentioned Xavier McKinney. I think the safety position is kind of up for grabs next season. Who knows what is going to happen to McKinney. I still feel like overall, except for a stretch of a few games, he had a very impactless season. I watch other safeties out there, Winfield,
Dane Belton.
Yeah, right. Dane Belton. Right. We talked about Dane Belton. And you look at Hamilton, who was a first round draft pick for the Ravens, but he's really come on this season for them. And I don't see them getting that kind of impact from McKinney ever since Wink got here. So that's another question mark. I'm not sure that they don't need another cornerback. I mean, do they really have? I think Ted Banks showed a lot of promise this year. I don't think he had as good a rookie season as some Giants fans seem to think he had. He wasn't getting beaten consistently, but on the other hand, by midseason, teams looked like they were starting to get a little bit of a book on it. But I still think he's promising, and he'll be the clear CB1 next year. But who's CB2 next season for the Giants? I have no idea who CB2 is. Trey Hawkins isn't even getting on the field other than special teams now in most games. And I don't think Adori's going to be back, even though the last couple of weeks he's made a couple of good plays for him, because he also made an awful play yesterday, a play he should have tackled Puka Nacua, and it looked like he was trying to strip the ball instead, and Nacua got free of him and went 80 yards. And Nick McLeod wound up playing the entire game at the boundary corner, which was fine, but I don't know that you want him to be your starter either. So I think you've got questions there. I think they still have questions on the interior defensive line. I mean, they've got some possible guys there, but does that look like a defensive line that's going to be rock solid against the run and going into the future? I can't say that I have faith in that. We have no idea what the edge situation is going to be next year opposite Kayvon Thibodeau, because again, I didn't see Azeez Ojulari doing a lot yesterday. Jihad Ward had one sack, but I believe they need help at edge. So there are a lot of questions, and naturally the biggest question of all is the quarterback question and how they're going to staff the quarterback room next season. And that's all up for grabs. And I think a lot of that depends on where they wind up in the draft and who's there when they do pick, and what Joe Schoen and his scouts think of the various quarterback prospects. And so I think the Giants enter next season with a ton of question marks.
Absolutely. And we have one more game to go. Obviously, Eagles game Sunday at MetLife Stadium, and as I said, it sure would be nice to end the season with a victory over the Eagles, send the Giants off into the offseason, finally having sort of broken that hex that the Eagles seem to have over them, although meaningless for the overall results this season. But it would be nice anyway to win that game and deny the Eagles an NFC East title.
And the Eagles are, I mean, exhibit A in how unpredictable the NFL is from year to year. I mean, they haven't had the belly flop that the Giants had this year. They're still a good team, but this is a team that's collapsing late in the season. And I mean, they just don't look good out there. I mean, for over a month now, they haven't looked good. And it looked like, if anything, their personnel was stronger this year than it was last season. And yet that hasn't wound up being the case at all. And, whether it's, I mean, I think people thought that they might miss Shane Steichen when he left to become head coach of the Colts, but I think people were kind of dismissive of Jonathan Gannon and figured the defense would just roll along with whoever they brought in there. But things got so bad under Sean Desai that he was basically demoted in favor of Matt Patricia, who didn't do a great job when he was with the Lions, and teams are moving the ball on them. You just can't predict these things. One of the things that really amazes me is that the Arizona Cardinals, one of the worst teams in the league, have beaten both the Eagles and the Cowboys this season, and how do you figure that out? So the NFL is just an amazingly unpredictable league, and I think that tells us that it's such a delicate balance of things that can either make a season, go up or go down. And last year things pointed up for the Giants. This year things point down. The reality of the Giants, I bet, is somewhere in between those two extremes. And the just question is, what can you get the arrow pointing up again next season?
Honestly, I think that if you flipped the 2 seasons that the Giants have had under Brian Daboll, 5-12 right now, and 9-7-1, 10-8-1. If you consider the playoffs, if you flipped those 2 seasons, I think people would feel really good about the direction of the Giants. I think overall in 2 years, what is that? 15, 20-1 at this point under Brian Daboll, which is better than they had been in the 5-year period, previous to that. So you flip those 2 years, people feel good. And you're right. I mean, the Giants haven't been good, but some of the close games they've lost yesterday against the Rams, the game against the Jets, the game against the Bills. You flip those games, and even though they haven't been good, that's an 8-win season right now. That's cusp of the playoff race with a chance to go to Philly and get to 9 wins and maybe sneak into the playoffs again. So the margin for error in the NFL is so small. And I think that's why when I look at the season overall, Tony, I look at, and I've written about this at Big Blue View, it's just frustrating because I don't want to say every decision was a mistake, but there are so many decisions that have been made from 90-man roster decisions to game management decisions that we've talked about a little bit. So many decisions that I was like, why did they do it that way? Or so many decisions that just, even if you thought they were right, they didn't work out the way that you thought they would. So it's just been that kind of year for the Giants.
Yeah, and as I say, yeah, it's such a delicate balance. You can't, you just can't predict what's going to happen even from week to week. I mean, I was sitting there watching Green Bay absolutely dismantle Minnesota last night, and I'm thinking, wow, the Giants and Tommy DeVito beat Green Bay a few weeks ago. They look but Green Bay looks like world beaters against a few of the other teams. They beat Kansas City earlier. And look at Kansas City. Kansas City now looks like this extremely vulnerable team because they don't have reliable wide receivers now. And so it's such a delicate balance, I think, for one team and another team. The 49ers have looked great most of the season, and then Baltimore comes in and just wipes the floor with them. And Baltimore now looks like an unbeatable team. They really rolled it up against Miami. Yet a few weeks ago, the Rams almost beat Baltimore in Baltimore, and the Rams looked like anything but world beaters to me against the Giants yesterday. Man, I watched that Rams team and I said, God, this team's going to make the playoffs, and they do not look like a playoff team to me. As much as I respect Matthew Stafford, I think that team has a lot of holds still on it. So I think there's a fine line that divides success from failure in the NFL. I agree with you. There are a lot of head scratching decisions that Daboll made, that Shane made. I hope Shane learns something this season about how to construct an offensive line room in particular, because it seemed like he didn't have a good plan for what would happen if things started to go wrong with injuries and things like that. And I just, other teams seem to be able to find guys that they can plug in when starters get injured, and he didn't seem to have that. And so, is there a problem with their scouting? Can you place all of the blame on Bobby Johnson? You just get a new offensive line coach and things will be better. What's the answer there? And I think that's his biggest. I mean, obviously the biggest question is going to be quarterback, but frankly, I think his biggest challenge is how do you construct an offensive line room that is at least just competent, if not good.
Well, if he can solve it, he'll be the Jerry Reese couldn't solve it, Dave Gettleman couldn't solve it, Shane hasn't been able to solve it yet, but so much revolves around that, and I'm sure that that we will spend a ton of time in the offseason talking about that, talking about quarterback, talking about all of the questions. It's going to be a long, entertaining, important offseason for the Giants, but one more game to go, Tony. And as always, thank you for the time, for the insight, for the opinions, and go enjoy your New Year's Day. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other and enjoy watching some college football today, too. All right. Bye-bye.